This video is going to show you how to adjust the guitar synth pickup height and sensitivity on a vintage Roland guitar synth controller. The proper adjustment of the guitar synth pickup height and sensitivity is key to getting the best performance from a vintage Roland guitar synth rig. These adjustments apply to all the vintage controllers from the GS-500, 202, 303, 505, 808, the Ibanez IMG2010, anything you can think of. Before you get started making these adjustments, I strongly recommend doing a setup of your guitar. If you feel no setup is necessary, just double check your intonation, as small changes in the position of the saddles can affect tracking. I'm using a Roland GR-300, GM70, and a US-2. The US-2 sends the G-303 signal to both synths and, thank you, Micki Kaufman. I will be listening to the synth tracking of the GR-300 and viewing the signal strength LED display on the GM70. The GM70 is a great all-around vintage guitar synth tool that also includes a built-in tuner. The goal of these adjustments is to have the guitar synth track evenly across your guitar's neck with dynamic response that goes from soft to loud, depending upon your picking. There are always going to be some variations, as open strings tend to track a little stronger than fretted strings, and the GR-300 actually changes its tracking filter around the 6th fret, but you should get a pretty even response everywhere, even like above the 12th fret. First, we're going to check the height of the hex pickup. The recommended spacing from Roland is 0.5 millimeters on the highest string and 0.8 millimeters on the lowest string. Just like a standard pickup, the closer the pickup is to the string, the greater the output level. Also, by keeping the pickup close to the string, you reduce the amount of crosstalk between the strings. So I feel like the low E and the low A strings are just a wee bit softer than the other strings, but everybody's pretty close, so let's just tweak the sensitivity of the low E and the low A string real quick. Okay, great. So what we need to do is take the cover off the back of the G-303 to make the adjustments, and I think Roland, maybe that's not the best head, Roland came up with several different ways to get you access to the internal trimmers. On the G-303 and the 808, you actually have to remove this panel with some screws. On the G-202, there are actually holes in the back of the panel that you just slip a screwdriver through, and then later on, like on the IMG2010 or the G-707, they add a little rubber cover. But unfortunately, we have to take off this cover on the G-303, which I guess they were thinking that you wouldn't be having to make this change very often. And I'd also mention, I only have 2 screws in here right now. For some reason, a lot of the G-303s that I've run across, the screws have become stripped here on the back. I don't know exactly why, because there shouldn't be any reason for you to be, once you make these adjustments, there's no reason to keep getting in and out of here. But here we go. So we now have access to the trimmers, and we're going to be adjusting the 2 trimmers that we need for the low E and the low A, and we'll just give them just a little bit more gain. So I'm going to be adjusting string 5 and string 6. So we don't need to turn these very much, just a little bit of a turn there, and then just a wee bit of a turn here, and we should be good. And then we will put the guitar back on and check and see how the levels are. Okay, with those adjustments made, I feel like the D string is maybe just a hair lower than the other ones now. The D string being the number 4 string. So maybe just a little bit more of a tweak to number 4, and then we're good. So I think this guitar is pretty much where I want it to be. I feel like I can get a great sound from the GR-300. I can see that the velocity levels in the GM70 are also where I want them to be. If I'm using the GM70 as a MIDI controller, that I do sometimes. It's not super fast, but it works pretty darn well, and you've got all those great MIDI controllers. But I feel like once we get into MIDI, the response is not quite as organic, say with a GR-300 or even the GM70. And MIDI notes can kind of jump out at you in a way that you don't expect. But I feel like I've got everything dialed in right where I want it to be. I hope you found this video helpful. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions, and if you've got a vintage Roland guitar synth rig, enjoy yourself. They're great tools for making music.